Check, check. Check, check, check.
There you are. There you are, right there.
Check, check, check.
See what you look like on. Yeah. Can you guys they're all that on my family. So you leave. You're
Test, test.
on the Zoom.
Test. You look very official with like the seal behind you. It's like presidential or something.
Say something really important.
Recording in progress.
Okay, so am I using my Zoom or my microphone? So I should use this, not my Zoom microphone at the same time. So this is the Zoom with an echo over there. Okay. So is that what we want that, or do you want me to use the microphone?
Microphone.
How about this one? They weren't both on. Neither was on. I did one at a time. So this is just the microphone sounds better. So, okay. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Tree and Design Review Board meeting of February 27th, 2024. John, can you do a roll call, please?
Yes. Marshall Boff. Lynn Diedler. Chair Lars Langberg.
Here.
Vice Chair Melissa Hanley. Here. And Carrie Bush and Christine Lebel are both absent today, but we still have a quorum in person.
Great, thank you. So we have no minutes to approve today. Do we have any updates from the planning department?
Yes. So I'll start off first with the Woodmark project. As many of you may have seen, the vertical construction has begun for phase 1 of their project. They are, I believe, anticipating towards the end of this year for that phase to be completed. And they haven't provided us with a timeline for phase 2 yet. There's additional details if anybody's looking for rental options or anything like that for the project on the city's website. We have a link to their direct site. The Hotel Sebastopol, I don't have any new updates for that other than they're still working for their archaeology stuff and funding. The weather's kind of starting to pick up and be a little bit nicer. So part of that is their excavation and such. So hopefully that will get started here within the next month or so. The Canopy project, which is the 80-unit townhome project behind the O'Reilly building at the north end of town, has their, they completed the draft environmental impact report at the January 27th Planning Commission meeting. That final report is scheduled to be heard by the Planning Commission at their March 12th meeting. So that would include the final EIR and then all of their entitlements with a recommendation to City Council. And then that is on the kind of forward agenda to go to City Council in April. And then hopefully either the end of April or beginning of May, the DRB would see that project as the final steps for design review and then tree removals that are on site. The Sustainable Transportation Grant, which the city was awarded, we are in the kind of final days of reviewing the 3 proposals that we received, and then we will be conducting interviews with the applicants that we've chosen, and then going through the contract negotiations as far as that grant goes. That is the grant that looks at the revitalization of downtown. And
what were those proposals?
From who or what were they as far as?
Yeah, well, what were they about sustainable things?
So it looked, Caltrans had a grant for the sustainable transportation grant that had a list of criteria points at looking at different ways to revitalize downtown, whether that be transportation or bicycle and pedestrian options and stuff like that. There's a whole list. I don't remember the whole thing. And then it also included a look at a two-way option for Main Street. So I'm happy to give you that scope of work and send that over to you if you'd like to see it. But there's a lot of different details in there that I can't remember off the top of my head. So
Is it on the city's website too?
it should be on the
Right.
city's website as well. Yeah. And the other project, Huntley Square, they had their tentative map extension approved by the Planning Commission at the February 13th meeting, or their last meeting 2 weeks ago, where they were requesting a time extension for that tentative map because it was coming up on expiration. But they're finalizing their construction drawings with hopes to submit to the building department here shortly. So that project will kind of get underway as well. And the Habitat for Humanity project is just finishing up some stuff on their their tentative map and final map. They have submitted their building permits, but they need to finalize those tentative map issues before we issue those building permits. So I think that's it for the planning department.
That's great. Thank you, John. Any comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda? Anything you know of out there, John?
We did not receive anything. We do have a member of the public here. So Max, if you would like to make a comment on items not on the agenda, please raise your hand. And I'm not seeing that. So
Okay. All right, thank you. Any statements of conflicts of interest on the board today? No? No? All right. Then we can move into our regular agenda. Item 7A related to the bunya tree at 6700 Sebastopol Avenue. So John, you want to sort of give us the redux of the staff report on that?
Sure. Yeah. I'll keep it short since we have seen this a couple of times. So this is for the request to remove a bunya tree at 6700 Sebastopol Avenue by the Barlow. For background, on November 28th, the Design Review Board received a preliminary report for the tree removal at their regular meeting, heard a staff report, and heard public comment. However, no deliberations or decisions were conducted due to a noticing concern. As this review was preliminary, staff still requested any input from the board regarding requests for additional information they might need to formally deliberate the application. Since that time, the applicant requested that the tree removal permit be considered again solely in light of the continued safety issues of the tree for the current site conditions. The applicant finds that these are a massive concern and prohibitive for procuring a tenant. And as noted, the city arborist found these safety concerns to be justified, and delay of approval would result in dangerous conditions continuing. This item was then heard at the January 23rd Design Review Board meeting, where the DRB directed staff to return with findings of denial for the removal of the bunya tree. And that is the reason that we are here today. Staff has developed findings for denial that are part of the staff report and packet. If any of the board members would like to revise or change some of these conditions, if it's have the applicant here, it's pretty straightforward for the denial reasons. And that after this decision is made, there is an appeal period for this project. So just want to note that at the beginning. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, John. So we have this Exhibit A, recommended findings of denial. Does anybody have questions for John in general or on that piece of it? Lynn?
Yeah, well, I sent all of the letters that stated that I thought in view of the extraordinary circumstances around this particular tree, it was very clear, concise, and broad, a lot of broad needed to be included to their denial, so that it seems more unequivocal that this was strongly recommended by the board that this does not happen. And there's additional reasons that I think should be included in that report in the denial.
And do you want to go through those, or how would you like to potentially amend what the staff has put together? I guess maybe we could let's see if there's any other general comments or questions for staff first. Melissa, anything from you?
The only question that I had was, we determined that the tree wasn't historically registered, but is there findings for denial because of its historical community interest? Is that something that can be added?
I would say that we would probably have to include it as one of, within one of the 6 findings for denial. Because the findings of denial and approval are from our municipal code. So we have that, so that's the basis on how we make the findings for approval or denial. So if there's a way that we can include that in one of these findings, then I think that would be appropriate.
So I guess that answers my question sort of to Lynn's. If he has further points, are you suggesting they have to be 1 through 6? We just add them into 1 through 6?
Correct. Yeah, they would have to kind of fit appropriately into those.
Because this is the language from the
code.
code.
Yeah, correct.
Mhm.
I believe from that list that Lynn had provided, there's probably a few of those conditions that we can include into these. I think a couple of them are appropriate, but I'm not, without seeing it
Mhm.
in front of me, I can't make a determination on all of them. But we can definitely go through them.
And are you saying like the language of this is from the code and therefore the language has to come from the code in a way, or just like more like topics?
Correct. So the language is written in a way, and this kind of came up in the objective design standards stuff that we discussed a few months back. In these findings, anything before the in that part of the each reason for denial is directly from the code. So anything after that, portion. So for example, number 3, the tree does not pose a likely foreseeable threat to life or property, in that the city arborist noted that with proper mitigation and tree pruning, the tree would not be a threat to life or property. So anything after that in that statement can be modified or adjusted accordingly.
Okay. So it could say in that the design review board noted ...
Correct. Yeah, you can also include that as part of the reason for denial.
Okay. Marshall, do you have anything more general or any questions for John otherwise? Okay. So Lynn, given what you've just heard there, do you see how your comments could dovetail into these ones, or how should we go through that?
I'm not sure how they should dovetail in. Is my speaker working?
I think it's not.
There we are.
Go ahead, Lynn.
Well, I'd say as far as imposing a danger, that, I point out here that these fronds are airy, they're light, they're not hard on any one place, and they fall slowly, and while they're prickly, they're not dangerous. Beyond that, there is steel frame decking, a very stout steel frame decking that can stop a lot more than those fronds or any other thing. And that framework is around the closest and most likely place for anything to fall out of that tree that could affect a passerby or someone nearby. And I think that should be added to that. Okay, okay. then-
I'm going to bring up the findings so we can kind of go through them together.
Okay.
And then just add them as we go and then. So bear with me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So Lynn, you're looking at modifying, is that finding number 3? To include some of those options that you had just mentioned?
That's correct, yes.
So to you, Len, when it says the tree does not pose a likely threat to life or property, that's not enough. That it doesn't propose, it's not a threat because the fronds are not so bad or something.
The fronds are nothing that poses a significant danger.
But we heard about the cones that do. There was one comment I remember, but
We did hear about the cones, but they were hardly documented, and it appears that they only occur 3 times a year. Pardon me, once every 3 years.
Yeah, right. Mhm.
And that other places have just simply removed the cones in mass to mitigate any problem with those. And that does not seem onerous, given the infrequency.
Okay. But the way that the finding is written right now, it seems like with proper mitigation and tree pruning, the tree would not be a threat to life or property, kind of already covers that point.
In a way it does, yes.
Okay.
And
Okay.
go ahead.
I don't have these tied to any particular number of the reasons that you have.
Well, if you just state them or a synopsis, maybe we can figure out where they might live, if that makes sense.
Shall I read them?
Sure.
Okay. Given the immediate proximity to the busiest perhaps the second busiest intersection in the town, this tree, the traffic, that intersection makes it undesirable for any use that's close to that intersection, whether it be for social purposes or a meal or a play area. That traffic, the noise and the traffic, make that an undesirable area to expand into. Beyond that, that property has pretty much exactly 2,500 square feet of deck space existing. And that's all the deck space that is 15 feet wide or wider. This is about 10% larger than the park area that's in the middle of the Barlow, the play area that's there. In other words, they already have a huge amount of space to work with if they want some outside activity. And out of all that space, the worst is next to the busy traffic intersection. Got any? You want to tie that to?
I'm not comfortable with adding that into this. That seems like if that owner of that site wants more outdoor space and they think putting a play area right by the intersection is going to bring customers in, I think that's up to them. I don't see why the tree, we should restrict that, anything about the tree related to the desire of what the tenant might want to do there. That just doesn't seem to make sense. If they want to put something there and the tree is an issue, well, they have to deal with that.
You know, it seems to me that to ask for something that's impractical and ask this board to spend time and the staff to spend time for an impractical suggestion on its surface requires just a little bit of response.
And you've just given some. I don't know that it should go into, to me, it doesn't belong in the denials for the tree removal, but that's just my opinion. We can go through all of them and then discuss them all, or if people want to chime in to any others along the way. Melissa?
Could I ask John, given the findings for denial, do you see a risk for a reapplication, or could the applicant come back? Is this, actually, I don't really know how to ask this question. Are we not shutting the door concretely enough? Is there a way for us to shut the door more concretely?
Well, Sebastopol doesn't have any grace period that, applicants have to go through or wait through before they reapply for an application. The decision of today's meeting does have an appeal period. So if the applicant is not amenable to this denial, they have the right within 7 days to appeal that decision to City Council, and then whatever decision they make would be final. If they decided to come back in, future at a future time, and have provided more evidence as to why this tree is a risk, or does meet the findings for removal as opposed to denial, that's within their right to do so, and it could be a different property owner in the future as well. So I don't think there's a way of kind of ever limiting this tree from being removed.
And Lynn, you kind of want to deny with prejudice, right? Like,
Well put, yes.
yeah,
But
I get that. Yeah.
we're spending a lot of time.
Can the city make it oh, it doesn't? Can the city make it a historic landmark?
It's not on city property, it's on private property. So it would, from my understanding, the property owner would likely have to go through the historic registration process to register that tree as a historic tree. And then based on that, it could have more merit to not allow it to be removed in the future. But that would be up to the property owner's discretion on that. That's not something that we can enforce upon them.
Well, I can go on with the other points.
Sure.
Just say,
Sure.
The tree is the centerpiece for one of the most attractive landscape areas in the community. And it's viewed by, 15,000 people a day who come into town there. And it's a great entryway area, a great entryway thing to look at as part of the character of Sebastopol. And removing this large tree from the middle of that area would significantly diminish the feel of that. And so it's important to the community for that reason. In addition to that, the design of the whole Barlow was approved by the Design Review Board. And at the time, that was an important part of making this appear attractive from the surroundings. And the whole project went before the city council, and the city council approved the plan that was recommended. And so it seems like, there's a master plan with this project that went through an extensive approval process. The tree was a factor in that.
And any other points? That's it.
That's a summary, yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I think we all agree of it. I mean, Melissa brought it up too, sort of the historical significance or the community significance. So could it be as simple as in number 3, the tree does not pose a likely threat, ... But at the end of that sentence, could we just add additionally, comma, it is a highly desired community and historical and community significance or something. We can just sort of tack it on to the end of maybe any of those, but I just saw number 3. That just so it's on the record, right? And
I like it.
I mean, that one certainly, I think we all commented on it even during the previous meeting. It's public commented on it. So to add that in, I think makes a lot of sense.
So just that, I've got it up on the screen here. At the end of that sentence, additionally, comma, the tree is a highly significant piece of Sebastopol history. Does that kind of satisfy the board's thought on that?
It's a beloved community resource and a significant history, blah, blah, blah.
I like that.
Asset instead of resource. Yes, thank you. Let's do that. No,
All right.
that's
So the tree is a beloved community asset and a highly significant piece of Sebastopol history. Does that work?
Yeah,
that sounds great.
but I'd also like to put in how it would, taking that tree out would greatly diminish the presence of that corner as a significant piece of landscaping that centers on that tree.
Perhaps its removal would diminish the gateway intersection to downtown Sebastopol.
As where in
I'll
the
just add that in.
I just keep going. This is a good catch-all.
Number 3 is, yeah.
Yeah, add that sentence to each of the 6 items here.
so along with
It could just be a sentence, that sentence after the historical piece you just added.
I might just say its removal would be detrimental to what am I trying to say? The gateway, something about the gateway, yeah.
The presence of not presence.
When you see that tree, you know you're here.
It's iconic, yeah.
like the character of Sebastopol's downtown core.
Yeah, I mean, it's an entry it's a gateway to the downtown.
It's it's
So-
the entry. If they took it down, there'd be no there.
Might be less there.
A bunch of people who draw for a living trying to make words.
Okay, so its removal would be detrimental to the entry of Sebastopol's downtown core. Does that work?
Yeah.
It's a little, d- I think it would, something like significantly degrade the landscape area, something a little bit more strong. How about the last sentence there? That removing this large centerpiece tree would significantly degrade the overall look of this landscape.
That could be at the very end in number 6. Yeah, I think that's a good place since it references the Barlow and the before.
Okay, so we're moving on to number 6 to add that.
Yeah, I think,
So, okay. So
if that's what Lynn was saying, I think that makes sense. And having it at the end when the sort of the Barlow as a whole is mentioned, I think that's a nice way to do it.
Feel free to throw out ideas as I'm writing this out. So I have the removal of this tree would severely degrade the landscape presence of this corner.
Can I get gateway there?
Of this gateway corner of Sebastopol. Does that work?
Good. Yeah, it's important.
Okay.
Yeah, that all sounds good. I'd be happy if you just more or less get the feel and polish it up at your leisure.
Okay. No, so this is what we'll, with these amendments, is what we'll go through today. So
Could you just read those two that we
correct.
amended?
Correct. Yes. So number 3 of the findings is what we are amending. Is the last 2 sentences. I'll just read out the whole thing. The tree does not pose a likely foreseeable threat to life or property, in that the city arborist noted that with proper mitigation and tree pruning, the tree would not be a threat to life or property. Additionally, the tree is beloved community asset and a highly significant piece of Sebastopol history. Its removal would be detrimental to the entry of Sebastopol's downtown core.
Since Becky's original report said that the tree did pose a risk, but she amended her comments in the meeting, did we need something formal from her, kind of amending her previous report?
I don't think so. I think part of her revision to that in the public meeting aspect is probably
Enough.
to
Okay, thank you.
And then number 6 is the tree is not matured to such an extent that is determined to be out of scale with adjacent structures and utilities or with other landscape features, and that the tree was in place before the building and the Barlow were constructed. The removal of this tree would severely degrade the landscape presence of this gateway corner of Sebastopol.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Any other discussion on these findings?
And we'll just open it up to public comment afterwards.
Oh, yeah. Any other discussion on the board at the moment? Any comments from the public on this agenda item?
Okay.
There's a
So
comment-
it doesn't look like we have any members of the public in the meeting anymore, and we did not receive any additional public comments as part of the posting of this packet.
So we got there was a chat related to another agenda item. I just saw it. That Max was here for a different, but sorry, but he had to he had to leave. Sorry. Marshall, something else you want to add?
Well, these are not in the items, the findings of denial. The items 1 through 5 that these respond to. The last item about a tree being out of scale. How do we get rid of that? When I read that, I couldn't believe it. I lived for many years in Mill Valley, and all the trees are out of scale. You know, it's a matter of opinion, and how can it be like a regulation?
Yeah.
You know, that it's just a matter of somebody's judgment. It's
Correct.
like a couple of people get together in a meeting here and say, "Oh, that's out of scale." Well, I don't think that should be allowed. I don't think it should be a factor.
Okay.
And that was just a comment.
The tree ordinance is one of my upcoming project things to revise and look at, because there's a lot of information in that ordinance that is old and outdated
Okay.
as it relates to a lot of the tree species that are in the list, as far as some of the street trees that are suggested to use, which aren't kind of that helpful anymore. So that is something that I'll be looking at in the future
Okay.
in changing, and definitely can come to the board
Good.
to get ideas on how we can look at that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay, because they're in item 4 looks like it could be modified also, the one right before it.
Yeah. With the situation.
It's if you have what I call a heritage tree and somebody wants to build a swimming pool, for example,
Yeah.
I think that would be ridiculous. So,
Mhm.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Marshall. Okay, we could bring this to a vote or motion unless anyone has any other comments on this item. No, would someone like to craft a motion for these amended findings of denial?
I'll do it. I make a motion that we approve the findings of denial as amended in today's meeting.
Do we have a second? Oh, Lynn, would you give us a second on that one?
Second?
Okay.
All right, I will call the vote. So Marshall Balfe. Just say abstain then. Say abstain.
Oh, abstain.
And Lynn Dealer,
Aye.
Chair Lars Langberg,
Aye.
Vice Chair Melissa Hanley,
Aye.
and we have 2 absence of Carrie Bush and Christine Lovell. That motion passes 3 ayes, 1 abstention, and 2 absence. So that is that motion passes, and there is a 7-day appeal period starting at the end of today's meeting that goes until March 5th by 5 p.m. So if the applicant wants to appeal that decision, this would go to City Council as the appeal authority.
All right. So I have a question for staff on that item. There were no conflicts of interest, but Marshall abstained because he's the alternate and he's not allowed to vote?
Because he was not at the previous 2 meetings.
Previous 2 meetings.
Yep.
Right. Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. Then that's agenda item 7. So on to 8 about the priority development grant. So to your question earlier, John, could we get the staff report and ask some questions of staff, at least take it that far and have a preliminary discussion and then bring it back to have the full board look at it?
Yeah, sure. Just with, so I'll kind of go through the introduction first and then kind of explain why it could be helpful to have the full group here to go over something like this. So on June 28th of 2023, the city was awarded a priority development grant from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, or MTC, which looks at priority development areas within a city. With this grant, the city has identified the Highway 116 corridor as a subject area to apply this grant to, as the grant looks at ways to help develop areas of town. One of the many things that the grant would do is to help look at streamlining processes for housing developments in commercially zoned areas of downtown. Currently, the city requires a conditional use permit for housing developments that are either market rate or not considered 100% affordable. This grant would allow the city in developing policy changes to streamline this process for these types of projects that are widely encouraged by staff and are also encouraged and typically approved by our planning commission. Some of these things could be looking at having a planning director or an administrative staff level approval on something like that. And staff would always have the authority to recommend any projects that they don't feel meet this criteria to the planning commission for a full use permit review. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. And also, as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, a full discussion with the full group might make sense, but to get some kind of preliminary thoughts about what types of site development and site design the design review board would like to look at, both as they relate to the design review guidelines and should a project come in under the newly adopted objective design standards, if they were to go through that process, what the board would like to look at, even though those projects wouldn't come to the DRB for review. We can kind of talk to applicants and go through that process. So I think that is it. The staff report also includes the scope of work from the grant. So there are some of the more key points that this grant allows the cities to do and look at. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it over to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So I think we could just sort of open it up a little bit to discussion. There was one public comment I'll read. It came in on the chat from Max, who was up there before. Max Caruso. He is a property owner at 885 Gravenstein Highway North, and he's interested in how the PDA grant can make development standards easier and better for future great housing units on that property. Permit streamlining sounds exactly like the kind of help that would make development of new housing there on 116 more doable. Unfortunately, I have to head to Santa Rosa for a meeting. I hope to be able to see the recording of the PDA discussion today and stay in the loop on this project. So that was public comment for someone who was on Zoom who had to leave. Anybody have questions for staff on this to start out? Melissa?
I guess I'm confused about, is this creating like a special district overlay that would streamline future developments in this area specifically?
Correct. So it would basically be a zoning district overlay.
Okay.
So the base zoning would not change as, the commercially zoned parcels would stay the same unless they went through a rezoning process. But this PDA grant would look at putting an overlay district over some of these, kind of similar to the objective design standards that we have, where, certain building types and such were allowed in these parts of towns and not in other parts of towns where, maybe more higher dense projects would be more applicable in the downtown as opposed to outside, the kind of outer skirts of the commercial districts and stuff like that. So it's not a complete rezone of that area. It's just an overlay district that would go over to help streamline that permitting process, because it can be a longer process. For example, when the DRB, I think it's almost 2 years ago now, had the review for Kathy Austin's project at 7621 Healdsburg Avenue, the one that's kind of next to the corner there of Healdsburg and Murphy. Kind of the discussions of turning that front building that's zoned commercially into residential. They've taken that idea and are pursuing that. And then also the other building that's there, that's constructed, came back through a use permit to convert those 2 ground floor units from commercial to residential units. But that's something that takes a use permit. So it's, 4 to 6 month process, as opposed to if a grant like this, where these districts were in place, could allow that to be a shorter time frame, because it doesn't have to go through the same longer bureaucratic city stuff. So
I guess I'm not seeing the impact of the design review process. If it becomes a by right use type, then cool, but shouldn't that still go through DRB?
yeah, there's some projects depending on the amount of units that would trigger design review. So just kind of looking at, what types of design aspects the DRB would like to see. I mean, it still comes to you guys regardless, but if we get into a project that is 100% affordable, where it's just a building permit and it doesn't trigger design review or the objective design standards, we're kind of at a staff level design. So if we can get ideas on, projects that you guys would like to see.
So we're trying to find the sliver of projects that can be exempted from going
Yeah.
through DRB.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's helpful. None.
Amen.
Hammer down. I have a question. So the way the staff report words this, it seems like a grant that could be many things, and the staff is choosing housing projects on Highway 116 as the focus of the grant. Is that correct, or is it the grant more directly related to what this content is?
Correct. It relates to the content of the scope. The key point that I picked out for the staff report was the streamlining of housing development in those commercially zoned areas.
So the grant is focused on housing.
It's kind of focused on a lot of stuff in there.
Okay.
There is kind of public improvements and other things like that.
Okay.
But
As it relates to DRB, that housing
housing
is
would be
kind
the
of
most
yeah.
relatable. Yeah. There are, we don't have a whole lot of new commercial projects that come through, but that's an opportunity as well. So,
Okay. And how, since 116 goes through downtown, does this dovetail in any way with the Caltrans grant, or could it?
it definitely could, yeah, because it could definitely kind of be a continuation of that corridor into the downtown and then beyond the
So
downtown.
right, so
farther south.
you refer to Redwood Marketplace. So the way you just said that, it's like the Caltrans grants about downtown, let's take some of that same effort and head north.
Correct. Yeah.
What about heading south
Um,
to the property that's for sale that has a taqueria in the middle of it, which to me is the most interesting potential project for property in downtown.
Yeah.
Its connection to the park
correct.
and the trail and all that. And I know it's a super fun site or whatever, but
Yeah.
is that a potential to be incorporated into this?
It's possible. I mean, that parcel is zoned commercial, so it could be a future housing development site. I want to say Carrie and I have been reached out to by a couple people that potentially could be interested in doing some sort of housing on there. But there are those two parcels where Calder Creek runs in a culvert underneath, which are, I think, part of the 5 parcels that property owner owns. So, obviously 2 of those would be, you couldn't develop anything on there. And then with the future of the naturalization of Ives Park and the Calder Creek thing of, possibly opening that part of the creek open, or opening the part of that creek and having a natural flow through there could be something that we, work with a future applicant.
Are you talking about the property where Hippozaz is?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. So that, I mean, it's obviously, just to talk about that for a second, it's a challenging parcel.
Correct.
There's creek, there's an old dry cleaners that's has an, environmental dam, soil remediation would have to happen. But to me, the only way that that property can be successfully developed is in partnership with the city.
Correct.
And the Department of Fish and Wildlife, maybe, I don't know. But so is there, to me, that when money comes into the city like this, could some of that be used towards that effort?
That I'm not sure on. I don't know if it is specifically tied to like a list of parcels that the city has in town.
That the grant is specifically tied to parcels? Is that
No,
what you're
I
saying?
don't know.
You
if,
don't know.
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
know if that is part of the overall scope. If it's, sometimes these grants have language in there saying that, if you have a list of potential sites, then this grant can be used to fund the future development of those. I don't believe that that's part of this grant. I think it's just looking at, providing some sort of improvement to this corridor area
Okay.
through the means of, the different things.
There's
All right.
a lot of focus on the Redwood Marketplace. I mean, it's the last really big opportunity in town. Has anyone spoken to them to see if they're even interested in
Yes.
engaging
Yes.
in
Yeah.
these things?
Yeah.
Answers, yes.
Yeah, the
Redwood
owner of that
Marketplace,
site,
the old
Oh, yeah.
CVS.
I know has been in contact with Carrie on multiple occasions of future development of that entire parcel. It's just kind of the Lucky's that's there and the CVS building that's there. They're privately owned, so it makes things a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
To
But
change
it's isn't it privately owned? The CVS Corporation or Long still owns that building.
Correct.
And the rest is owned by one owner, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that's how it is. And Lucky's, I believe, has a
Lucky's
lease,
long-term
with-
lease.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Which
So
I know within the 5-10 years that lease is coming up.
yeah.
So
It's just the little bit I know of it, it's difficult to develop because of those 2 owners.
Correct.
Longs / CVS and the rest. If Longs doesn't really want to sell it except at this price, $3 million, right?
Yeah.
So it's just I think again, it's if this grant could somehow push those property owners to talk or whatever and come up with a combined great idea for the city to do, for our city to have a development there, that would be great. I don't know if that's, again, if the grant can be used sort of that specifically or not, or is it more of this kind of zoning overlay / streamlining process money.
I can confer with Carrie and see if there's part of that we can, if it's built into that or not.
Okay.
And if it is, then, let her know that the few more board members that are here would be interested in at least 2 of those sites in town.
Has Sebastopol ever had an SSTAT?
Yes, it has. As a matter of fact, I was part of that. The Sebastopol has a very amazing SSTAT document that has officially been adopted by the city, but it sort of sits on the shelf. And, and that property that I mentioned was
Right, the first one.
identified as this great greenway between the park and the trail. Yeah.
It feels like something that should be referenced heavily as part of this effort.
Yeah. And the downtown grant as well. Yep. Marshall, Lynn, any comments, questions for this item?
Yeah. How much extra time does design review board take on a project, and what does it cost? In general, I mean.
So if it's, usually we'll have one meeting for a project.
One,
We'll have, so for a regular development project, in most cases, there will be one design review board meeting, unless it's continued or there's additional things that may or may need to come back. And some meetings are half an hour and some are 2.5 to 3 hours. And the other component of it as well is if there's a preliminary review, then that's one additional meeting. For most design projects, we do recommend our applicants go through a preliminary review with the design review board so they can get a feel of what the DRB is looking for. It was successful with the Habitat for Humanity project, so it varies.
so maybe 2-3 months on the outside and a month if it all good projects come up and we like it kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you're talking about meeting time, public meeting time, and
correct.
then there's staff time.
Yeah, so
to work
staff
with the applicant.
Correct. Staff time kind of varies. If it's a good proposal and every checklists are done and made, and applicants are responsible and replying to comments and concerns and stuff like that. Our typical review of most of the plans is about 2 to 3 weeks for department review. And then planning kind of goes through and captures all the conditions of approval that those departments have. So I would say maybe another month or 2 of, potential staff time. And then there's also the noticing part. In most cases, that's a day or 2 of work. So,
Overall, if you look at the work that goes into a multi-unit place, the purchase, the development, the funding, all that, it doesn't seem like it's a big obstacle. But living with the results of a project that is not well done is something that the city is stuck with, and the developer moves on. And overall, it just seems important to have someone looking over your shoulder that wants something that works well with the city.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's been a few times where a project's come in and maybe it's going to trigger some sort of design review, but staff reaches out to the chair and vice chair to see if this is a project that they want to see come back to the board, or if it's something that they feel comfortable with staff making the approval for. For instance, the 500 Robinson, which was at the church there. They had originally come to design review board with some shipping containers that were converted into kitchen and cafes. Had that design, and that didn't work out as far as their funds go. So they went to a stick-built kind of approach. And we're curious if, this needed to come back to the board, and staff reached out to the chair and vice chair at the time. And, they both felt that the project still was in the bounds of what it was approved for. And, the material that was being used didn't warrant it to come back for an additional meeting. So, when we do look at potential admin permits or design review permits,
Yeah, well, Robinson Road and 116 are quite different.
yeah, I'm just saying in general, as far as if a project that comes in where we're not sure on if it's going to trigger an admin design review or if it's a design review board meeting, we coordinate with the chair and vice chair at the time. So there is that little bit of kind of looking over your shoulder type of thing in that aspect of it.
Marshall, any questions?
Well,
Comments?
I sort of agree with this, well, I strongly agree with this, that the design review for most projects, I think, is mandatory. And I know on some it could be eliminated, but I'm just thinking back at all the meetings I've been to before I moved here, where a developer on a large project was, for example, just going totally in the wrong direction and so forth and so on. So we developed a process on big projects that there be a workshop meeting first, early in the project, with very preliminary drawings, so that everybody was on the same page with the conceptual design. And then after that, they only came back once, and it was, there might have been a little tweaking, but I don't think it, I too don't think design review on highly visible projects takes up that much time, because commercial projects take a long time. And but at the same time, I don't want to see a situation like in San Francisco where they talk about streamlining, speeding it up, and I never notice anything changes really. They might have the meetings in secret, but it's still going on. It's just endless, that we don't want that. So anyway, that's just my thinking.
And I would agree with you. I've done work in jurisdictions that are a much more collaborative process and early, so that the client isn't spending a tremendous amount of money on design fees and getting down the road. I think it's unfortunate that by the time we see it, it's a fairly baked set. And so the client's invested a lot of time and money in getting there. And we could redirect them a lot earlier in the process and just be more helpful. And also they can have their go, no go much earlier. And if it turns out their pro forma is built on a stucco box that we're going to hate and not allow, then they can rebuild that pro forma pretty early. So I think we should be looking for ways to get to a yes sooner, and be more helpful earlier. And that can be, like you say, informal. It can be workshop style, and it doesn't need to have a huge amount of staff time presenting it. But in some of the jurisdictions where I've had not quite a workshop, but you can come away with approved meeting minutes for design direction that you can hold your hat to and attach to your building permit, and like it's ready to go.
Yeah.
But I would like that kind of process to be reviewed.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments on this? I guess question is still, I guess we could bring this back so that the other board members can participate as well.
Yeah, it's, it is something that we can definitely put on future agendas. It doesn't have to be done today, but I just wanted to kind of put a couple additional things on the agenda today because, we just had the one item.
So what is there a time frame to this? Because we found out objective design standards had a deadline we didn't realize till we were well into that process.
I don't believe so. So we were just awarded this, fairly recently, and this is not work that city staff will have time to do. So there will be some sort of RFP kind of proposal contract thing that goes out. So we might be able to, if we can get some things like you'd mentioned, to build into the scope of work for that contract or RFP, then, we can kind of brainstorm on those and
Great.
Add that. As long as it is still within the scope of what the grant requires,
Right.
then it's definitely something that, we can put into our scope of work.
Okay.
Can I ask that this chair be replaced?
What's
That chair specifically?
It's an item not on the meeting
No, it's
that
not
I'm.
this chair.
No, not you, not this chair.
Is this a coup?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, what a nightmare.
Okay, so I guess there's no action needed on that item.
Correct.
And we'll just wait for the next round of that. And then there was one other item on today's agenda about field trips, or the next field trip.
Yes.
What was it? The last one was to Crooked Goat, I think, wasn't it? That was a good one. Field trip to revisit projects that the DRB has been involved in. And so, John, you mentioned possibly
What
north
kind of project?
projects the DRB has looked at in the past to see, were they true to what we approved, or did things change? We've done this twice now, and it was fun. It was fun to do it, just to walk as a group and see some projects that then kind of reflect on what had happened.
Yeah. So Lynn, for kind of a little bit of background on that, our first tour, we looked at the Florence Lofts project, and we also looked at the Flavors restaurant, and then a couple other projects. I want to say we looked at the Healdsburg and Murphy project as well.
Yeah.
I can't remember if there was an additional project on that first go around, or if it was just kind of that corridor of town. The bank we had mentioned, but we
No.
never made it up to the bank.
Right.
And then on the second tour we did, we kind of focused it around the Barlow. So we looked at the Barlow townhomes, which were kind of newly developed. There were some changes from the originally proposed or approved plans. I think it was mostly the color choices on the buildings themselves, and maybe a few things. And then looked at some of the
What are the Barlow townhomes?
those are the ones that are right across the street from the Morrison one, or Highway 12. Those 18 units
Oh,
behind.
the white ones.
Correct.
Right.
And then we also looked at a few of the properties within the Barlow that received either a facade improvement grant or went through the DRB for changes to the building and signage. I think was a big thing that Christina brought up with the large, tall signage that's right in front of Community Market there. So we are bringing this back again to potentially look at some future sites in town. I did mention in the staff report kind of looking at the north end of town, so that Redwood Market as a potential option. And then also if this type of meeting would be helpful to have, or this type of walking tour would be helpful to have with the Planning Commission, if we did focus it on the Redwood Marketplace up there, because any policy level decisions of rezoning or entitlements would go through them as well. So I'll leave it at that and open it up for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, suggestions?
I would like to see the St. Stephen's project once it's done. The Robinson Street.
Oh, the
Yeah.
Cafe,
the cafe over there.
is it, do you know the status? Has that one been constructed or under construction?
I believe they have their building permit pulled already. I'd have to check with the building department because it's kind of past our checkoff
Yeah.
points now. But that's something that I can definitely check with them and see where they're at and maybe get a timeline on when they're expected to have that completed.
Mhm. Well, so you bring it up, and what we've done is looking at past projects, but the Redwood Marketplace would be more of a future project. So we could do that one and the one I'm talking about at the Taqueria. Just talk
Mhm.
about here's some two very different, very big, interesting sites. How can we, as a DRB and a planning commission, advocate for something good to come there? That might be a nice, an interesting, sort of design thinking meeting.
Sounds very positive.
Yeah. Instead of just going, oh yeah, they did a good job or they didn't do a good job or something, I mean, you go look at the cool bank building, but I do that anyway.
Yeah.
So that's a suggestion. Anything else? Yep.
Yeah, there's a topic that I would like to discuss at length on the design review board, and it'd be changing the sign ordinance. And I accidentally brought a packet, a folder full of signs that I put together probably 8 years ago, maybe more, that I think would really help business in the downtown core and make the downtown core a lot more attractive. And recently I went around the downtown core, showed them drawings that I'd showed them a long time ago. And they, I just happened to talk to, I think, 5 businesses. Every one of them said, wow, yeah, I would love that kind of thing. And I just passed out a few sketches that I had made, and that I would like to change the sign ordinance to allow more interesting, better signage, particularly in the downtown core. And I'd like to have this as a discussion item
Okay.
whenever there's time.
Okay.
Thank you. That's a great idea, Lynn. Yeah, we probably couldn't have a pine cone cafe sign now under the current ordinance, right? I don't know, but it's probably
It'd
too
be an
tall
exception.
or something. It would be an exception.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful sign too.
Mhm.
It was fun to look at it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lynn, that there's definitely quite a few things in that sign ordinance that need to be changed. I always feel that any building that comes in for a sign package that's on a corner almost always triggers some sort of sign exception because of what they're allowed to do and stuff like that. So maybe that being another focal point of that meeting, to look at corner buildings having maybe a little bit more square footage allowance or size or something like that, given that they're unique and that not every building is going to have that street presence. So
I think also language that encourages more innovative design is always good.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not even saying the square footage is changing from what we allow, but we encourage whimsical, exciting signs for our downtown or whatever. You just put that in the beginning of the sign ordinance. And if I'm an architect reading that, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Maybe I'll try something different and tell the corporates to try something different,
Yeah,
right? Or whatever,
yeah.
right? Like, so just, even if it's just in that kind of an intro language, it can go a long way.
For sure.
Sometimes there's a nice overlap with public art too. They can kind of be
Mhm.
gotten away with murder in jurisdictions with public art and signage. So that maybe there's some way we can
That's
we can
true.
blend this language. But I mean, these are delightful. Like, I would love this. This would be great.
Thank you, Len. All right, so any last comments? Actually, I'll just report on from the, speaking of public art, the Public Art Committee has just received, I think it was 34 entries for a new commission piece to go at the beginning of the Joe Rodota Trail here in town, sort of across from Hop Monk, for the little sort of triangular site to commission a piece of artwork there. So we got a lot of really amazing, actually, to me, highly professional, interesting variety of entries. We've reviewed them once, and our next meeting we'll pick 3 finalists that get a little stipend to develop their idea a little more for us to choose. So that's exciting. And it's kind of what we've been trying to focus on is the 4 gateways or entries to the city. So there's the one we did on the library, the Michael McGinnis sculpture on the library to the north. Ned Kahn was awarded the first one and had lots of issues with Caltrans and the site he chose, but there is a site, it's going to happen close to the bridge, and that's going to start pretty soon, weather permitting, basically, for foundation work. So now we're kind of trying to check off the south entry, and then whenever there's more money, we'll do one somewhere on the north. So that's that report. And with that, we can.
There's
Yeah, go
2 things that I wanted to mention as part of the planning department that I forgot. The first one is March 19th at the city council meeting. We'll be having the interviews for the remaining DRB positions. There's 3 positions that are up. I believe it's Chair Langberg, Vice Chair Hanley, and then Christine Lovell's position. So they'll be having that. And then,
I missed the opening statement. That was about, can you repeat where?
yeah. So the at the March 19th city council meeting, they'll be holding the reappointment interviews for the 3 DRB positions that had come up. So that's Christine's position, Lars, and Melissa, which all 3 of them reapplied for.
And there are how many applicants?
There was the 3 applicants, and then there was also an additional applicant that came in after the period had ended. So that one is kind of on hold, or would be a future one.
But the interviews are not at the council meeting.
They're
correct?
before the
in front
council
of-
meeting,
Yeah, that's right. And then they
Do the appointments afterwards,
appointments at the meeting.
or during the meeting.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
Yeah. Sorry. And then the second one is relating to the active transportation plan that SCTA is doing. I just was informed that the consultant is looking at targeting the April, I think, 9th meeting of the Planning Commission to provide their second milestone update. So that includes all of the data that they collected through the community surveys and outreach event that they had here in Sebastopol, and then also the event that myself and another member of the public had at Hanley High School back in December. I'm also I'm going to be working with the Planning Commission to do some sort of kind of community workshop, possibly before that April 9th meeting. There's a couple members of the public that stress that being able to provide input on a plan like this is very difficult to do in a 3-minute time frame, and having some sort of workshop to work with the planning commission, who would be the approval authority on that plan, would be helpful to the community members and stuff like that. So that's something that we'll look at doing, hopefully before that April meeting with the planning commission. So those are the last 2 items that I have. Sorry.
Great, thank you. Okay. Anything else from the board? We're good? All right, let's adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Recording stopped.